It is Tuesday, 9:15 a.m., and Arnoldo from sales receives a sudden email from Zomtech, the most important customer that we have. At this point, Ricardo needs to approve a credit to this company. It's not the only credit approved to them, but nevertheless he does. He gives green light and sends a message to Otto from production control, who needs to prioritize Zomtech's order because, hey, this is our most important customer. So then production starts manufacturing the product in accordance to the specifications. And eventually Hannah from logistics, also known as Harley in the criminal world, starts doing the volumetric analysis so that we can load the truck to the maximum capacity, because that costs money. Lastly, once it is done, we start loading that truck, whatever it takes, and then we ship that good, whatever it takes, no matter the weather conditions that we have. And that, by the way, driving the truck is very well known Ramona the driver, our face to our customer. She steps out and delivers that good to Zomtech. Okay, so what you just experienced here is the typical order cycle for many companies around the world. So basically, we have a customer here represented with this illustration, and then we have our company represented with this black box. Inside of our company, well, we have our different business functions. Typically, we have sales, we have finance, we have production control, logistics, and of course, we have way more. We have IT, HR, etc., etc. But for this purpose, all that we care for the order cycle is just these four entities. Now, the orange line that you see here, this orange arrow, is the order. So that is the order departing from the customer. Maybe that is sent electronically, and it is arriving to sales. So sales receive these orders. They process the order, understanding what kind of customer that is, what kind of pricing they are going to give to this customer, what kind of conditions. And eventually, finance receives that information, because finance needs to approve whether this customer will receive a credit or not. Just keep in mind, in the business world, companies don't pay everything up front. Companies get credits, they give credits, right? So here finance is going to have a look at that. When everything is right, when everything gets a green light, then production control is going to plan the production. Why plan? Because guess what? There are many orders that have to be produced for many different types of customers, all at the same time, and they all rely on the same limited resources. So the limited resources, they have to be managed as to maximize and prioritize these orders. Okay? Eventually, once this happens, now comes logistics, and they do all the planning for shipping those final goods back to the customer. So here we get to see the full cycle. Now, if someone would ask you, how would you assess the performance for this cycle? What kind of options do we have? Well, one option would be time. How long it takes from the order to be received until that order becomes a product. And that could be this lead time. You know, we can delimit from this point until this point. And this could take, I don't know, in a company like this, could take something like 2 weeks. No? So that is very normal. But someone might say, well, you know what? At this point, that is interesting to know, but for our customer, that is not really relevant. What matters to the customer is until the good reaches to their door. That is what it matters. So we might also opt to measure the time all the way until it gets delivered. And this is kind of a convention. Where do you want to cut it? Where are you going to establish the standard as to measure this time. Okay, so if that is lead time, well, that is relevant because we want to deliver fast. But that is not the bottom line, because the bottom line here is, did we deliver on time? And that is from the perspective of our customer. Not only that, did we also deliver complete? Why complete? Because an order consists of many different items. It's like a combination, a long list of items. And who says that you can deliver them all at once? Maybe you have to ship, little shipments until you complete that order. Very common in many industries. So here, the question is, are we delivering on time? Are we delivering complete? Now, we can think of additional ways to assess what is happening here in these flows. For example, we can also come up with in stock so that we can be very responsive into supplying goods to our customers, because the goods are already manufactured, right? But then the question is, hey, wait a second, it's always nice to have inventory as a buffer to buffer sudden orders, but that is also money. And that is money, that is working capital, basically. We could have used this money for other purposes. So the question is, how much inventory is good to have? Okay, so that could also be a way as to assess the efficiency of this story. There are more ways. For example, from the finance perspective, could also be, when is the customer paying us? When are we receiving that money? But also, when are we supposed to pay to our suppliers? Because it would be kind of strange that we receive the money in 2 months' time, and yet we have to pay to our suppliers in 2 weeks' time. So what does that mean? That we are funding the business of someone else. Ideal case would be the opposite. We receive the money right away. We can hold the money. We don't need to pay it right away. Maybe we put that money into the bank or Bitcoins or something like that. We make additional profit, and then we can later on pay our suppliers. So this is what is known as the cash-to-cash cycle. So as you can see here, there are many different options that we can rely on as to assess this story, the story of our supply chain performance. So coming back, this module is about that. It's about performance metrics, in particular to the operations happening within the supply chain. So what I expect you to learn at this point is the following. Only one goal: how to measure the reliability, agility, and responsiveness for a supply chain network. Here you notice that these keywords are in italics. This is the language of the supply chain: reliability, agility, and responsibility. Let us have a closer look at what that is, and let's see how these things can get calculated. These are KPIs, these are metrics. All right, so let us start with reliability. Reliability is about consistency, the consistency to do the things right, which means we want to deliver the perfect order and we want to measure that. Okay, so but let us first understand what could mean the perfect order. The perfect order should meet the following conditions. Number one, you are delivering the right product. Number two, you are delivering at the right time. Number three, in the right quantity. Number four, in the right condition. Number five, for the right cost. So it is very easy to do something wrong in this 5-point list, as we can see in this picture. Maybe it is the right pizza, salami pizza, the right time. It's just that it was delivered in the wrong place, obviously. So it is the same in business. But normally in business, we tend to focus more in aspect number two, delivering right in the right time, and number three, in the right quantity. So I'm going to show you how this can get calculated. So let us assume that you own a pizzeria, and as you know, you have to deliver pizzas within 30 minutes. That is your promise to your clients, your value proposition. So it turns out that last month, 75% of your orders were delivered on time. That means they were delivered within the 30 minutes. And 98% of your orders were delivered in full. In full, that is a terminology to refer to completeness. That means the orders, 98, were complete. That means 2% were missing something. I don't know, maybe a Coca-Cola or a Sprite or napkins, who knows. So what is your perfect order fulfillment? Well, we simply multiply these two figures. It's 75% times 98%. That will lead you into 73%. Now, let us stop here for a second, because you might recognize that although you have a 75 on-time delivery and a 98% in full, you only achieve a 73%. Sometimes we tend to think in averages, and when we see a 75 and a 98, we might believe, we have a gut feeling that the perfect order fulfillment is something around the 80 something. Well, that is not the case. It has to do with the math here. So do the math. Of course, just consider that these are percentages, so that you have to apply the decimals, 0.75 times 0.98. Now, here's a small parenthesis. The perfect order fulfillment is also known as on time in full, or TIF. That is, I guess, easier to remember. And maybe just last note, you notice here on the bottom part of this page that there is a link, and this link is from McKinsey Quarterly. Perhaps you have heard about it. Now, if you go to that link, then you will read an article that is just about how companies measure OTIF, because it turns out that there are different standards. For the purpose of this course, it is not necessary that you learn all these different standards. We're going to stick to this simplicity, but I think it's important for you to know the complexity behind. And who knows, this might be useful, I don't know, perhaps for your PM8 project. Could also be. Okay, so let's move on. All right, so if we would like to apply the concept of reliability now on a different type of environment like the one you get to see here, which is a university, it's just a random university, what could be an example for that? How can you measure reliability? The answer, we're going to discuss it live next time that we meet. How about that? So you keep it there. I'm going to ask a volunteer, even though this volunteer might not want to be asked. I'm going to ask for that answer. Just think about it. All right, so moving on. Reliability is about consistency. So what about responsiveness? Responsiveness is about speed, and that is the time that we already discussed. The time that it takes is a period between customer placing an order until that order is received. So in this case would be all this black arrow that you see here. Because for the customer, that's what matters. The customer doesn't care if you finish at this point. Who cares? What matters is this point here. So we are going to measure that. This is what is known as order fulfillment cycle time, also known as OFCT. I think I don't need to explain you what these letters mean, right? Okay, so if we want to calculate the OFCT for different environments, we will find the following. If we are talking about a grocery store, that will be a 0. Yeah? Because in the moment you place the order, you receive the order. I mean, it's kind of funny, but yes, it's 0. It's immediate. Now, if we are thinking about Amazon, which is a fulfillment center, by the way, yeah, it's basically a fulfillment center. It's a warehouse where goods are already stored and orders are being received, and then they get delivered straight from this warehouse. Then the question is, what do you think it would be an OFCT? And maybe it would be something between 2 or 3 days. That would be the average. I mean, at least based on experience, but we can really measure that as if you would be doing a special project. You can extract the data from the past and really measure what is going on with this OFCT. So order fulfillment cycle time, well, it's an elapsed time, basically. And here I have an example I'm going to show you now, which is this. So this is, yes, I know, it's McDonald's. Sorry about that. It's just that for some reason I get so many examples out of this place. For me, it's like a laboratory what I see there. So, and I go there as a researcher, and yes, I admit I like a lot the apple pies, the French fries, and the cheeseburgers. So when you go there, you know that you have this screen waiting for you. You make your order, and then you will get a paper. And this is how it looks like. And by the way, this paper is a real one. It's a paper that of an order that I made. Okay, you can see I had a McMuffin and another McMuffin and a Sprite. Okay, so not so healthy, but sometimes it's like that. So here is this Quittung, this receipt with the time. So the question is, what is the OFCT for order 50, which is this one, if the customer received it at 10:04 and 50 seconds? So let's have how can we calculate that? Well, we receive the receipt at 9:54. So therefore, it's very easy to calculate the elapsed time between 9:54 and 10:04. So how many minutes are these? 10 minutes. So it was just 10 minutes. Now, the question is, how come it takes so long? And here's an interesting thing that I just found. On the right side is another piece of paper. This is the piece of paper that is placed on this box, right? And here you also have another timestamp, and you recognize the following. The order was triggered at 9:54, yet the order was assembled until 10:01. That means it took them something like 7 minutes to finish that. And that is already a big question. What happened here? What happened here that in these 7 minutes, maybe they were busy with other orders, maybe they were just confused, maybe they are new employees, who knows? But I think 7 minutes is a little bit too long. But here comes the second part of the question. What happened between this 01, which is like when the order is already assembled, and 04? We're talking here about 3 minutes in which this order was just waiting there, getting cold. And all this data, which is very interesting, well, it gives you so much information to dive in, because here a question would be, hey, I mean, you are promising like a burger just made for you to the customer, and yet it takes 10 minutes for this customer to receive it. Then why not just having all these hamburgers pre-assembled, just like in the old times, and then, you know, you just deliver these burgers like that. So this is what a business consultant might question. So something is going on in this kind of business case with regards to McDonald's responsiveness. So this is how you can start looking at things, just like the way I did here in this example. All right, so responsiveness is about speed. Agility, that is the other term. Agility, well, it's about how fast you can respond to sudden changes. And we have different metrics, typically are 4. For example, number 1 is called the upside supply chain flexibility. That means the number of days to respond to an unexpected given demand. For example, 15% of demand increase. Maybe there was a promotion triggered. How many days it took you to respond to that peak of demand? A peak of demand unexpected could be, think about Corona crisis and toilet papers. That is a perfect example. You know, so how flexible are you? How many days it takes you to respond that? Upside supply chain adaptability, the amount of capacity you could add in 30 days. Suddenly people get crazy about, I don't know, a chocolate ice cream. This is completely unprecedented. We have never seen something like that. Okay, so how fast can you build up enough capacity as to manufacture and to fulfill that sudden demand? Yeah, so it's about increasing amount of capacity within a given time frame. That would be 30 days. Now we can also have the downside supply chain adaptability. That is the amount of drop in orders you could absorb without significant financial effect. So Suddenly we have a valley in our demand. Sometimes happens and we were not expecting that, and we can absorb that without suffering that much. Maybe our competitors will suffer having this loss of sales. What could create that? Well, let's think again about the corona crisis. People are not going out buying stuff. Have you thought about it? That's the reason why you have so many rebates on Nike.com and all these pages all the time. 20% off, 30% off. People are buying less. People don't go out. So suddenly you have a drop in orders. Can you absorb that? How far can you go with this drop in orders? I mean, we can really measure that. Okay. Lastly, we have the so-called overall value at risk. That is the amount of money you would lose if a major disruption occurs. So now we're playing with different scenarios. Think about Fukushima catastrophe. By the way, these kind of scenarios, which are basically impossible to predict, are also known as black swans. Black swans is a coined term out of a book from Nicholas Taleb. Well, I'm not going to talk so much about that, but it's an interesting book for those of you who are very ambitious. Do yourself a favor and read that book. You will learn a lot. I learn a lot. The black swan. So events which are hard to predict, which are very disruptive, are normally referred as black swans. And the funny thing about black swans is that once these events happen, now people look into the past and they think that these events could have been predicted. Like, hey, if we should have believed that, then we would have taken the right measures. It is not that simple. So these are the so-called overall value at risk, the amount of money you would lose if a major disruption occurs. Okay, so this is the way to measure agility. So different forms. All right, so the last group of metrics that I would like to show you is in reference into how good you manage your assets or the efficiency of the management of assets. So usually you have 3 metrics, and this is number 1, cash to cash cycle time, C2C. Number 2, return on supply chain fixed assets. And lastly, return on working capital. I'm going to concentrate just on the first one because number 2 and number 3 are the typical ratios that you learn on your classes of finance and control. So let's have a look at cash to cash cycle time. It's quite interesting. First of all, this is the formula. So cash to cash cycle time equals receivable days plus inventory days minus payable days. So you see here days, days, and days. And of course, with regards to receivable days and payable days, well, these are the dates that for suppliers and payment by customers, which are determined by the payment terms that you agree to. So this is something that is based on contracts, right? Now, what about inventory days? I mean, normally it sounds kind of strange because your inventory, you want to measure that in units, but can you measure that in a time? In a time frame like days? Well, assume that you are selling 100 units on average daily and you have an inventory of 200 units. Well, you can say that you have 2 days of inventory. So your inventory is in reference to your average demand, so to say. So you can measure inventory in days. Okay, so the goal here with the cash to cash cycle time is to achieve a shorter one. So you want to go for a short cycle time because that means less working capital that you need, and that means more efficiency for your supply chain. So once again, your goal is to minimize the cash to cash cycle time. Let me show you 3 examples so that you get a feeling how it gets calculated. Okay, so this is example number 1, and these are the conditions. So first, you give 30 days of credit to your customers. So these are your receivables. Your suppliers give you 30 days of credit. These are your payables. Now, you maintain inventory to cover 15 days of demand. Okay, so what is the cash to cash situation here? Well, that is our formula, and this is how it should look like. Cash to cash equals 30, because of this, the 30 days of receivables, plus 15 days of inventory minus 30. So that means our cash to cash cycle is 15 days. Okay, let's stick to that. What is the meaning of that? Because your payable and your receivable days are the same, 30 days, you only need enough working capital to pay for your average inventory level, which is these 15 days that we got to see here. Let me show you example number 2. Now, conditions are a bit different. Still, we are giving 30 days of credit to our customers, but our suppliers require us to pay immediately when placing an order. Look at this situation. The money is taking 30 days to be received, and yet we have to pay upfront everything right away. We still maintain our inventory to cover 15 days of demand. So what is the cash to cash situation? We have our formula, we substitute our data, and we have 45 days. Why is that? The 30 days plus the 15, but now we have 0. That is the 0 from payable days. Yeah, because we have to pay immediately. So now we increase. We move from 15 days to 45 days. And that means that we need enough working capital to cover our average inventory, the 15, plus the sales for 30 days. So that is not really a good situation now. Things got worse. And I think your gut feeling tells you why. It has to do with this situation, this combination that you have here. Okay, let us run example 3, and that is a more optimistic situation because now we are requesting our customers to pay right away when they take the orders. So we receive the orders, they pay. Now we can pay our suppliers within the 30 days. And we don't maintain inventory at all because now we wait to buy materials until we receive an order from our customers. You see that? Okay, so that is how the formula is going to look now, is a negative of 30 days. That's kind of strange because negative time, it doesn't make so much of a sense. It doesn't feel right? But what is the message here? You don't need working capital at all because you're getting paid before you have to give any money to your suppliers. In fact, we can stockpile cash from your customers in the bank and make interest for those 30 days before paying our customers. So this is what it means. So here we are right on top of the game, so to say, with this cycle. That is a situation that in business, in this kind of supply chains, it has to do a lot with this power, who is having the power. And by the way, that is the reason why you learn tools like Porter 5 Forces, because you want to know who in this network is the big guy, so to say. So here in example 3, we are the big guy. We give the conditions. Okay, so let us compare. Examples 1, 2, and 3. Here we have different situations with receivables and payables and inventory days. So at the end, that results on different cash to cash cycles. And that means in terms of working capital, how the money will be used for inventory and sales, or not at all. So here we want to go for number 3, thinking just in our company. But again, we are within a supply chain. So we wouldn't want to, let's say, squeeze our suppliers until the last drop because, hey, what are we going to do? We are going to kill those guys, those businesses, just for the sake of maximizing our gain, and then tomorrow we cannot get good suppliers. So there is always kind of a balancing game here. So companies always look to cooperate. That's my message. Now, here's another reflection. Just keep in mind that reducing working capital is useful, but it's not the final business goal. I mean, the final business goal is always profit. It's about making money. So at the end, and it's not about productivity, it's not about reducing working capital, it has to do with this profit. And we have to find the sweet spot of our variables that can maximize that situation, that result. Okay, so coming back to our initial constellation here with our customer and our business functions and everything. So one way to ensure high level of responsiveness, good on-time delivery, good in full delivery is by means of having stock, right? Having inventory. Because if we have inventory in our warehouse, we can always respond rapidly. As soon as the order arrives, if that product happens to be a highly standard product, well, we simply put those boxes into the truck and just ship those goods, and that's it. And of course, that is a good strategy, but it's also the question of what is good to have here, because that is also a lot of money, and that is also a metric that we want to keep track on. So on the next module, I'm going to show you the three different ways, three different ratios that are in relation to this, to the inventory management. So thanks a lot, and I'll see you on our next module. Bye-bye.